All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am Ilti Seke. I'm a consultant with Educational Advocates College Consulting and former assistant director of the Connors Family Learning Center. In my current work, a special focus of mine has been supporting neurodivergent students, helping them not only to find the right academic fit, but also the resources and communities to find once and to thrive once they get into college. So I'm very thrilled to be joined tonight by the representatives of three outstanding institutions that reflect the range of support available to neurodiverse learners in higher education. So each of our guests will begin with a short 5-minute overview of their programs and services. And afterwards, I will be facilitating some guiding questions. And then I will open it up for questions for the general audience. So thank you, Lisa, Jim, and Ben for joining us tonight. If you could start by giving us a short overview of your services and a sense of what makes your program unique compared to the traditional accessibility services. And also if you could include a natural presentation of how do typically students get connected with your program or register with your services. Jim, would you like to start? I'm just going by.
Sure. Let me share my screen here real quick. I am with the Learning Effectives program at the University of Denver. And we've been serving the neurodiverse and learning different student at the University of Denver since 1982. So this is our 46th year is part of this. So I'd like our folks attending the webinar here to kind of look at these three boxes and kind of think to yourself, where are you in this kind of spectrum of abilities? So if you're over there on the far left, you're able to take care of yourself, you're able to manage your own medication, you can do emotional regulation, you keep track of your time, you make sure you get to class on time, you don't need to be told when to sleep or eat or study. Basically, you can do everything by yourself, okay? Then over there on the right, and then kind of teal, you need somebody to help you with everything. So you need somebody to help you with medication management, with emotional regulation, with when to sleep, when to eat, when to study, when to, basically you need somebody for all aspects of your life. And then in the middle, you can do things most of the time by yourself, but sometimes you just need support. Okay, so if you're over there on the left and you're responsible for basically everything, welcome to DU or any other school, because you really don't need support to that point. Anything that you're going to be looking for, you know how to go out and advocate for yourself and get support. If you're over there on the far right, where you need some help, I encourage you to look at schools that are really built around students with learning differences and learning disabilities. Schools that have programs especially built around your needs and supporting you. If you're in the middle, where you can do things mostly by yourself, but sometimes you need support, that's why the LEP exists. We're here to support you, do things with you, and not so much for you. So we offer a medium level of support, and you can choose to attend or participate or take advantage of anything that we offer. You assess your own needs. We don't have any curriculum. We don't have anything that you have to be doing for us. Basically, it's student-driven, student-led. It's based on what you need. This is kind of a snapshot of students in our program and their learning differences. 80% of our students have multiple diagnoses. Most of them have ADHD, but you see we have anxiety, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia. We have about 10% of our students are on the spectrum. Over there, if you look at that other learning disability, those are usually processing disorders like visual or auditory processing disorders. So all of the students that work with us in the LEP have a documented learning diagnoses. And you can see it's kind of all over the place. So all of those together add up to about 435 students in our program. I put this on here because the LEP is a pay-for-service program. But I want to make sure that nobody ever thinks that you have to pay for your accommodations at the University of Denver or any other school. You know, your accommodations are part of your Americans with Disability rights, and they should be provided for you. So your accommodations are separate from your participation in the Learning Effectives program. Our job is to support you with the use of those, with executive functioning, with planning, et cetera. So this is what you get as part of LEP services. And all of these are inclusive. You know, it's like a Disney cruise. Once you're in the LEP, everything is included. You don't pay for anything else. So you get academic counseling, where you meet one-on-one with an academic counselor for about an hour a week. You're with that same counselor the entire time you're in the program. So you don't have to worry about changing, learning somebody else, doing something week to week. You're with that same person all the time. We have executive functioning coaching. This is my executive functioning coach is part of my staff. And his job is to support students who need to build skills around executive functioning. So skills around task management or skills around task initiation. He works with my professional procrastinators. He's the one that works with the people that haven't even started procrastinating yet, all right? Then we have tutoring. So we have one-on-one course-specific tutoring. So if you're taking a business calc class, the tutor that you're working with one-on-one is a business calc tutor. All of them have been trained to specifically support students with learning differences, and all of them are either certified by or in the process of being certified by the College Learning and Reading Association. You can sign up for 2 hours of tutoring per day per class. So if you're signed up for 4 classes at the University of Denver, you can sign up for 8 hours of tutoring per day. Don't do that. It's too much. Okay, but it's there for you. And as they say on TV, but wait, there's more. 3 days a week, we have 4 hours of tutoring in drop-in, in math, writing, and STEM support. So if you're just working on a paper and you need specific help right now, maybe some ideas or maybe some proofreading, we've got writing tutors there for you as well. We've got events. Every Friday, we've got Let's Eat Pizza. Come on up, have some pizza with us. We bring in therapy dogs a couple times a term. Going back to the pizza, don't get too excited. It's just Domino's. But it's good pizza nonetheless. And then we have transition support as students move from high school to the University of Denver. So we do programming for students. We have an early move-in program called Flight. So it's a pre-orientation program. We have programming for students. We have programming for parents, helping parents figure out maybe some of those communication strategies or communication plans, what's expected as far as communication goes. Because parents, I guarantee you that if you leave it up to your students, they won't call you until they need money. So make sure that you have a communication plan and expectation for them. So again, this year we have 435 students in our program. That includes 25, or doesn't include, that's with 25 staff members that support those students. In addition to those academic counselors and my executive functioning specialist and my tutoring coordinator, I also have 90 tutors in the program that work for us. I have 20 peer leaders who work with small cohorts of students as well. And they're the ones that put on all of my social programming. So they're like my best ambassadors. So yeah, that's kind of what we have. This is the easiest way to get a hold of us. Just our email address is super easy. It's just lep@du.edu. You can call us at 303-871-2372, or you can even follow us on Instagram if you would like. And it's University of Denver LEP on Instagram. So thank you very much for allowing me to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was wonderful. Ben, you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also going to share my screen, so just give me 1 second. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Ben Briskin. I'm the Marketing and Special Programs Coordinator with the Beyond Access program, which is located within the University of Connecticut in Storrs, Connecticut. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about our program and, kind of how we operate things here as well. I really liked what Jim just shared from, talking about what he does with his program up in Denver, because, we think about things similarly from a Beyond Access perspective. I'm going to get into kind of how our program works and how it's structured and how we sort of run things, but we're, attempting to do the same sort of thing and like provide a program where it's really student led and student driven. The goal of what we're doing with our Beyond Access program is, like Jim said, there's plenty of resources at the University of Connecticut for students to access their accommodations, which again, similar there in that those are legal rights of students, those are free, those are stuff that we encourage students to connect with our office in general about. But then where our Beyond Access program comes in, as sort of a fee-based program is students might be looking for a little bit more of an individualized program that covers different areas of their student experience, helps them think through things about with their well-being and, with the ultimate goal of building up those sort of like self-independence and self-advocacy skills that can serve them wherever they're going after the fact. So, same sort of philosophy there with our Beyond Access program. We're certainly always looking to prioritize the voice of the student and make sure that, what we're working on aligns with what the students are looking for out of our program. In terms of the structure of the program, so again, we're a semester by semester program, so students can choose how many hours per week they would like to sign up over the course of a semester. We have our different tracks there on the screen. Typically it's 1, 2, or 3 hours per week. We also have a flex track of 1.5 hours per week. If students are ever interested in signing up for a different amount of hours per week, they can certainly get in contact with us and we can work with them to sort of figure something out that best fits their needs. Students are able to sort of arrange those hours in a system that works for them. So, again, if they're meeting with us for 3 hours per week, that could be 3 1-hour meetings, that could be 2 hour-and-a-half meetings. It can be whatever works for them and the person they're meeting with. So the people they're meeting with is what we call a strategy instructor. That is either going to be someone on our Beyond Access staff team, which is either myself or Allison Knight, who's the director of our program, or we also have a wide-ranging number of graduate students who are studying in related fields at UConn, and that could be things like school counseling or psychology, education, a variety of different programs, who both have a background in working with students with disabilities and also are receiving training on working with students with disabilities at UConn as well. So those are the people that they're meeting with. And again, it's going to be the same person you're meeting with over the course of a semester or multiple semesters if students are signing up to work with Beyond Access for multiple semesters. Students are able to sort of create different goals that they want to work on, and I'm going to get into what those typically can look like for students. But really, again, we're trying to make sure we do our best to hear the voice of the student and say, what are the things you're looking to figure out once you're at UConn, whether that's transition support, whether that's executive function support, whatever it might be. For meeting modality, we typically like all of our meetings to be in person. Given that we, University of Connecticut has other branch campuses, we're mainly based out of stores. We have different branch campuses in places like Hartford and Avery Point and Stamford, Waterbury. So, we are able to meet with students with a wide ranging modality options that could be virtual. We'll have people in person at other campuses as well. Just depends on the semester and how many students are interested in participating. As for what we're doing in our meetings, again, a lot of the times it is kind of focused around executive function support, just because that's something we hear a lot from the students that we work with. Things like organization and planning and time management. Those are really common and like recurring themes that we're hearing from students. So we really like to get as into it as the student is looking for, right? We'll have students do things like send us their syllabi so we can like be aware of like the deadlines and what's going on in their classes and asking informed questions. We'll have students, talk about what works for them in terms of organization, and if those are also things that can be shared with us from a program perspective, whether that's using a shared calendar, using a shared Microsoft Office suite of, whatever they might be using, or if students are using Gmail, any of those products as well. So again, we really try to make sure that, in our meetings, we're both individualizing like how we're having these conversations with students on how they'd like to be organized, how they sort of plan out their time, how they're managing the different deadlines they have, and make sure that, it's going to work for each individual student that we're meeting with. And, it could look different depending on the student, but that's why we try to make sure we're having those conversations, we're checking in, we're doing what works best for each student. Obviously, executive function support's a big area of focus. It's certainly not the only area of focus we can work on with students. A lot of the times it can be, anything along the lines of like academic skills. So we'll have students come in and say, hey, I want to focus on how to take notes better. I want to learn how to study for exams better. I want to make sure I'm, being able to focus while I'm working and not getting distracted. So really, we're able to work on anything related to like academic skills and providing strategies and feedback for students who are looking for any sort of support academically. One difference maybe from the program at Denver is that we're not able to guarantee tutoring necessarily for all classes. What we always tell students is if it's something we have a background in or we know about or are capable of answering, we certainly can. If it's not something that we have any background or experience with, we're pretty well connected with the different tutoring centers on campus, and we can make sure students are connected with whatever tutoring services they need. Other types of goals that students like to focus on, health and wellness, whether that's like creating exercise routines or eating healthy, utilizing different UConn campus resources to make sure they're connected on campus. Some of the older students, or even really any students, like to focus on career readiness and development. So, like making sure they're getting their materials ready, or learning how to network, or looking for internships and jobs, or even stress management. So, again, a lot of different things here. It's not required that every single student works on every one of these, but we like to make sure that students are aware that these are all within the wheelhouse of what our program can certainly offer. Couple quick things to touch on as well. I've kind of covered today already the core of what Beyond Access is. We also offer different things to try to supplement, that sort of those weekly meetings as well. We have study hall hours that we can guarantee, like students can come in for a quiet study space and check in with a strategy instructor and make sure they have something planned for what they can work on. We also have a Friday social group, so maybe that's a theme for today. We try to get pizza when we can, but really we call it Husky Hangouts. We are the UConn Huskies after all. And that's basically just a social group that meets every Friday. It started because participants in Beyond Access were looking for a way to meet other Beyond Access students or just work on social skills or make those connections or get involved. And so we offer that every Friday afternoon as well. And then we certainly try to run a different variety of other sort of one-off social events over the course of the semester, whether that's like a movie night, an arts and crafts night, trivia. We're pretty big on sports here at UConn, so sometimes students want to all go to the basketball game together, so we'll organize that. Whatever students are really interested in is something we can focus on. Again, fees. Again, I did mention this is a fee-based program. Wanted to be transparent about, what our fees and what our financial options are. So you can see the different tracks on the screen. Again, that's per semester. So again, whether that's the fall or the spring, that's what it's going to look like for the whole semester, which is 15 weeks of meeting time. We certainly offer Beyond Access in winter sessions and summer sessions, and we have different fees for those. But, that's something we kind of talk about with students on a case-by-case basis. We do have plenty of scholarships available on our website, and we always encourage students to go apply for those because we want to make sure that as many students as possible can access our services. And of course, we have payment plan options as well to also further help students participate in Beyond Access. One of my last things here, just in terms of who is able to participate with Beyond Access, one thing we like to just make clear as well from the jump is that our program is open to all UConn students. We're based out of the Center for Students with Disabilities. So again, 95, maybe a little bit higher percentage of the students we're working with is students with disabilities who are registered with our center, but there's no sort of qualifications or there's no limitations that we have for participating with our program. We essentially have an application on our website, not competitive. It's not looking to sort of disqualify anyone. It's really just more of like a statement of interest that people are looking to participate in our program. It asks them to sort of give us a little bit of context and background. They can share preferences for what they're looking for, and we can use all that info to match them up with a strategy instructor that would work best with them. So again, our program is open to all UConn students. We really recommend just students apply to UConn, and once they've gotten accepted and are committed to come to UConn, then they can reach out and connect with us to talk about enrolling in our program. Lastly here, if there's anything you'd like to talk further about, whether that's one-on-one or any specific student cases, feel free to reach out. We have our website right there, our Beyond Access website, where we have a lot more information, as well as you can feel free to reach out to either our main Beyond Access email or Allison or my emails to sort of connect one-on-one. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Ben. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit about our resources. So I'm going to share a slideshow as well here. Okay, wonderful. So I work at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is a private liberal arts college. I'm an alumna of the college, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Academic Services and Learning Resources. And our office supports students across the board, and we work really closely and we collaborate really closely with the Office of Student Accessibility Services. And some of the student support that Academic Services and Learning Resources offers are academic coaching. So these are one-on-one appointments that students are able to make with a professional staff member. And that coaching can look like executive functioning support. The coaching can look like time management support, navigating academic advising as well. So we serve as academic advisors for students across the 4 years. Our office also hosts a variety of skill building workshops throughout the semester, which are available to students. All of these resources are included alongside the Holy Cross tuition, so there's no additional cost to any of these resources. We have a peer-to-peer tutoring workshop for STEM plus E, so plus economics, as well as Spanish for students, with daytime appointments as well as walk-in appointments in the evenings. We have a peer learning program for chemistry support. We also have a mentor program in which first-year students are paired with a junior or senior mentor to support them in the first year in college. And that mentorship usually looks like meeting once a week with a junior or senior. We also have a pre-orientation program, which enables students to take an additional course before jumping into their first year at Holy Cross. And that program is called Passport. We employ students across the board, and we work with students very closely. And some of the ways, right, as I mentioned, for academic coaching, this is really where a lot of the support falls for students that may identify as neurodivergent or students that have a learning disability. So we work very closely in individual appointments to support study strategies for students. We work with students to develop effective time management skills. We do support students on an individualized need-based basis. We develop strong test-taking skills and support students through also accessing accommodations if that's necessary. For test taking, we discuss ways to broaden Holy Cross to navigate Holy Cross beyond just the curriculum. We also help support students in creating academic plans and accessing resources across the board. Executive coaching also is specifically organized to students who identify as neurodivergent. So some of the examples of the skill building workshops that our office offers are time management workshops, focus and attention workshops, information about AI tools, and ways to navigate that, test-taking strategies, as well as work-life balance on campus. This is an example of some of the workshops that we're currently offering this semester. So there's a lot of different workshops that students are able to access. These are some examples of the tutoring that we provide for students. Tutoring includes natural sciences, accounting, psychology, economics, math, computer science, and Spanish. Students are able to set up recurring appointments with peers, and they can meet with peer student tutors for half an hour or an hour, depending on their needs. We also just integrated Spanish tutoring as well to support students in vocabulary. We also support students so if a student needs a tutor in a course that in which we don't offer tutoring, we're able to actually match a student with a tutor in the subject that they need. We also have the peer assistant learning program that supports students in taking chemistry, and PALS supports students in implementing session plans, supporting students in navigating class material, and advising students around learning strategies. The mentor program is a partnership between ASLR and the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and we support students across the board. pairing them with a junior or senior mentor. And these mentors are trained in helping students navigate and access campus resources. This is this summer transition program into college, which lasts a year, but we have the initial part in the summer, which is a month-long program where students are able to take a course to strengthen their academic skills before jumping into their semester. So these are, this is ND Network is an affinity space that I founded alongside Erin Mayo, who's an assistant director in the Student Accessibility Services office, and ND Network is an affinity space for students who identify as neurodivergent. And we offer opportunities for students to connect with other students who identify as neurodivergent. So this is a really important space for forming connections and friendships on campus. And we also support students in accessing resources. And we hold meetings monthly for students. We employ students across the board. And here's some information about our office. I will also send a link to our website in the chat if anybody is interested in inquiring further. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had so many questions that you guys already answered, but just to put it out there for parents, because I think Jim mentioned this earlier, and I think this can be very confusing for some parents to realize that there is an accessibility office or disability services office. Sometimes it's called differently in each institution, that supports students with disabilities and that provides accommodations. It's a very separate office from all these programs that's just been mentioned. But one thing I want to clarify is, Ben, you mentioned that beyond access, you do not need to be part of the disability services office to take advantage of your program, correct? And then I guess my question for Jim is, because when I was working at Northeastern, in order for students to access the support program, the LDP there, they have to first be registered with the Disability Services Office for accommodations. Is that the case for Denver?
No, I'd say 95% of our students are registered with Student Disability Services. The only thing we require is a documented disability.
Okay. And Ben, do you require that, a documented disability?
Nope. Again, it's really like the only thing is just being a UConn student. So, again, a lot of times that information is provided by the students, and we certainly wouldn't turn it down if they would think that would benefit our meetings and our structure, but it's not an official requirement we have from our program.
Thank you. And Lisa, for you, I guess my question is, can any student take advantage of your program? Like, do they have to have any diagnosed disability? And especially I'm curious about the passport program. Like, are there any criteria for students coming in and want to take advantage of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of our programs are accessible and available to all students at Holy Cross. Passport is a program that requires an invitation. I am not sure what the criteria is for the invitation, but I know that that data goes through the Office of Admissions. So if there's curiosity around that program, the Office of Admissions would be able to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess another thing I usually have with anxious families and parents. So while I was working in these two institutions, right, like when students come and become 18 years old or register or become students of the institution, they are protected under FERPA, the Family Education Rights of Privacy Act, and that's often prevented me as a specialist to disclose parents any information unless the student signs a waiver. I guess my question is for you guys is, do you have any warning system in place if the student is falling behind academically, or any way you can communicate, or are you still restricted by FERPA to communicate with parents who want to know how their students are doing academically? Jim?
So yes, we are still restricted by FERPA. There's a lot of angles on that. If a student has signed a educational records release form, we can at that point speak with parents but we always do so at the request of the student. If a parent calls and asks us questions that we weren't expecting that call, we'll always check with the student first and make sure that it's okay for us to disclose something to their parents, even though that release has been signed. If there's a safety issue, on the other hand, if we feel like a student is not leaving their dorm room, or has got food insecurities, or something is potentially unhealthy with the student, I will reach out directly to the parents and speak with them. We also have student outreach and support on campus. So if a student goes AWOL on us for a little bit, we'll reach out to student outreach and support, and they will reach out to the residence directors and to the students directly on campus, and try to reach out that way first.
Yeah, I would say, just adding on to that, Jim pretty much covered entirely what we try to do here at UConn as well. We're also, with Beyond Access, following the FERPA rules and regulations and guidelines. We basically, our philosophy is we're gonna have everything done through the student. So it starts with we have a family communication authorization that we have students, either fill out that yes, they do with their eyes, no, they don't. Are there exceptions? We try to find that out right away from students, just as a first and foremost. And then again, if there's any questions about academics or specifics, we're always going to go through the student. So we are certainly able to communicate with parents and answer questions, as long as that's something the student is comfortable and is giving us permission to do. And it's, again, going through the student and they're aware of everything going on like that as well. And, that's something that we try to, I think Jim maybe mentioned this as well, but we also have a family orientation that we try to offer for Beyond Access. So we try to be proactive in talking about that with parents as the semester's starting and early on, so that they're just aware of kind of, the things that we are able to share, that we might not be able to share, that need to be in conjunction with what the student wants as well. So, that's kind of how we organize it with Beyond Access.
Anything else to add, Lisa, or?
Yeah, so we do operate under FERPA. So we, by law, are not allowed to disclose any academic information. However, in my support, especially with students who identify as neurodivergent, what sometimes happens is parents want to share information with me. So I am more than happy to listen and learn about the needs of your child, or I guess the future college student. I don't know if they're going to be a child when they're in college, but I'm always happy to learn and understand the needs and the concerns. However, I'm not able to share any information.
Thank you. I have one more question and I will open up to the audience. So at this point, you guys, anyone in the audience have a question, feel free to put in the chat and I will get to it. But my last question is obviously the relationship with faculty, right? So a lot of times a concern is that faculty really don't know, or like they're there because they're amazing at the content, but not necessarily like a pedagogy of working with or right, teaching neurodiverse students. So do you offer, like this, I guess it's two-part question. One is, do you offer any training or resources for faculty on how to support neurodivergent students in their classroom? And then the other part of the question is, do you ever collaborate or work on the students' behalf with professors? I don't know, anyone wants to take on this daunting question? Jim?
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
First of all, yes, we do offer trainings for faculty and staff at the University of Denver. We have a thing called the Neurodiversity Institute. So far, we've probably had about 150 faculty members go through that. We're in conjunction with the Office of Teaching and Learning. And so, yeah, we help faculty implement universal design for learning in their classes, and hopefully the idea is to lessen the need for accommodations for all students, and make learning make sense. In addition, we do neurodiversity institutes for staff as well, because staff are going to interact with students a lot more than faculty generally do. They're going to have, whether it's residence directors or folks in the cafeteria or whatever, they interact with students a lot more. So we've probably had 250 or so staff members go through our Neurodiversity Institute for staff. We never reach out on the behalf of a student to faculty. We will everything we do is with the student. So if a student is having a specific issue with a faculty member during their academic counseling session, we'll sit down and we will support the student as they write an email to the faculty member with their specific requests or their advocacy, but we won't reach out preemptively or on their behalf. We have worked with faculty, however, who know that the student might be in the program, and they say, I need some ideas on how to better support this student. So if the faculty member reaches out to us, we will communicate with them about things that we know that are better learning methods for the student involved.
Yeah, and I can also jump in here and provide things from a UConn perspective. I would say the first part of that question in terms of training and resources for faculty and staff at UConn, that is primarily something that our main office tries to do. So again, our Beyond Access program is housed within the larger office of the Center for Students with Disabilities, and there are definitely efforts from the staff within the center that are looking to provide trainings or share resources or answer questions, go into classrooms, help with language on syllabi, whatever it might be for the different faculty and staff at UConn in terms of working with this population. So again, that's maybe not Beyond Access specific, but obviously, we're sharing in that same goal of trying to make sure that, everyone has resources that they need. In terms of collaboration with professors and advisors or whatever it might be, again, similarly to what Jim said, we're always going to go through the student. So students can come into our meetings and they can say, hey, we got this email from a professor, like how can we work through this together? And we're able to do that. We're also able to, attend meetings or meet with professors with the student if that's something that makes them more comfortable, given that we are meeting with students on a weekly basis and we maybe, sort of are more knowledgeable about what's going on, or we can help sort of translate what the student's saying, or even, make sure the students are on the same page as what the professors or faculties are offering. We're able to do that, but that would obviously be a little bit of a case-by-case basis, depending on what the student felt comfortable with and like what the situation was. So again, it's similar in that sense of like, it's always going to go through the student, but we certainly are able to provide that support depending on what the student's looking for.
Lisa, anything to add?
Yeah, so one of the things that we discuss in our academic coaching appointments is self-advocacy, and being able to navigate conversations and discussing one's needs. We also collaborate really closely with student accessibility services that provide documentations for students if needed to faculty. We have a class dean system. So the class dean works really closely to support advocacy and the needs of students across the campus as it comes to navigating conversations with various faculty members. And I also sometimes will sit with students and support them in writing emails to faculty that have been more or less challenging to work with for students. And if the student expresses that they want me to reach out to a faculty member, if their needs aren't being met, that is something that I have done in the past with permission from the student.
Yeah, thank you. There's one really good question. I could personally, working at BC and Northeastern, could have a field day with this question, but I will let you jump in. What is the most common challenges you see first semester in a college for a neurodiverse student? Jim, you go ahead.
All right. Time management is a huge one. They've come from a relatively structured environment where they're in class 8 hours a day, and literally their day is managed by bells. Okay, they have a bell, they go to the next class. They have a bell, they go to lunch. They have a bell, they go to the bathroom. It's very Pavlovian, right? But here, they only may be in class 4 hours a day, or maybe even 2 hours a day. And now they've got to figure out not only how to study, but when to study, where to study, with whom to study, but also how to have life balance, how to do fun things, how to actually get sleep. I think time management is probably one of the biggest things that they have. And then the other one, as Lisa was saying, is self-advocacy. most of the students that come into our program have had parent support through IEPs or 504s their entire, since they were first diagnosed. Now, all of a sudden, they're having to take that role on. So that self-advocacy can be very challenging for some of our students. Even the first time they come into a meeting, they may just look at their parents and say, you take care of it. Well, it's like, no, you can't do that. You have to take care of it. We have to do it together. Okay.
Lisa, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently, I agree with Jim in that time management is a conversation that takes place a lot. So we discuss time management structures and strategies for students very frequently. Also, I think social dynamics can be a little bit challenging to navigate entering college. So in that way, I think the mentor program is really effective. We host community events for students. And also ND Network is one of the reasons that we founded ND Network was to create a space where students can unmask and feel safe in forming connections with other students who might hold the same identity.
Anything else to add, Ben, or should I jump to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to cite basically what's already been shared. Self-advocacy and time management, certainly two of the most common things that we're, seeing from students and trying to work on. And in addition to Lisa's point, the social aspect, definitely. I guess the only thing I would add on is just like, it's a lot of new and it's a lot of things that can be overwhelming. Even one of these things could be overwhelming for students. So like all of these managing the newness of like all of it together, that's something that when we're talking with our students, it's even like working with them on, can we break this down into smaller tasks that we can work on together? Like what's an objective we can talk about or work on today? So yeah, just seconding everything that's already been shared.
Yeah, it's that false freedom, right? Coming in, like there's no structure and how to manage their time. Here's a question. Are any of your programs competitive? When should students apply by? Maybe as soon as enroll in college? This is a good question.
I can jump in really quickly. I have to say that so long as a student is accepted to the College of the Holy Cross, all of our programs are open and accessible to all students.
Yeah, I would say for UConn as well with our Beyond Access program, again, I touched on it a little bit in my presentation, but again, our qualification is really just being a UConn student. So it's not competitive in the sense where you need to apply into it. It's really just more, letting us know that their students are interested. And then, we'll certainly work with them to try to get them enrolled in the program as soon as we can.
And for us, we do have an application process. I wouldn't say it's competitive. Our application is really looking at independent living skills. Are they, if we go back to my presentation and think about that red box, are they truly in that red box to where they need support with stuff, but they don't need help with medication management. They don't need help with independent living skills. They can pretty much support themselves on campus with independent living. One thing that we do let folks know, though, is that so they're going to apply to DU and then apply to the LEP at roughly the same time. We don't look at the application until the student has been accepted to DU. And once they've been accepted to DU, we'll look at their application and admit them into the program. Then they commit to DU. Once they've committed to DU, then I send the contract. And the contract is what secures their spot in the Learning Effectives program. I encourage them to get that to us early, like mid-June, early July at the latest, because we will have a wait list, from students who waited too long to get their contracts back or decided later to apply. So it's not competitive, but you do want to get stuff to us early so that we can hire the staff appropriately.
Excellent. We have a few more questions. So this is okay, Catherine. So I'm concerned that I may not have set my son up properly before going to college this fall. He was diagnosed on being on the autism spectrum at 4 years old. Early intervention led to IEPs through senior year in high school. He has mental and physical health challenges. He's now considered an adult and has also asked me about accommodations at his new school. I checked and he's not listed as disabled in their files. I also need to transfer some health info to the health center. I have not put this in place and he looks to me to do this. I completed the SSA redetermination appeal as he had been been off their disabled list registry. I think I'm trying to see where this question is going, maybe to the fact of how can you act retroact. So like to advocate for an adult son, right? Who probably cannot, like as a parent, you can't really, like there's a fine line once you get from high school to college, right? Like it has to be a student initiated process. And that's I think that the most difficult part of some parents I have encountered a lot of students at BC, like who did not want to pursue accommodations, right? And the parents really wanted to push for them. So these services is really have to be a self-initiated process. You guys correct me if I'm at your institution is a little different or not. But if a student does not initiate the process and not pursue the need for support, there's not much a parent can do once the student got to college. I guess this is really not a question, more a statement.
I think what I would encourage Catherine to do is to have her son contact Student Disability Services and maybe set up a joint meeting between Student Disability Services, her son, and herself. And she needs to bring in appropriate documentation of his diagnosis. With the diagnosis of autism, she's going to want to bring in a neuropsych evaluation that's probably fairly recent, especially if those accommodations weren't granted to start with, or they've been removed from the Student Disability Services roster. So I would encourage her to contact their disability services, set up a joint meeting with her son, bring in the appropriate documentation. There's no time period which all of a sudden you can't qualify for accommodations any longer. It's just you need to come in and make sure they have the appropriate documentation to provide the accommodations or to document the neurodivergency needed to justify those accommodations.
And it's a process, right? I mean, it can take up to several weeks depending on the institution. And also and now I think the only thing is that it's not retroactive, right? Like when you register for accommodation, it moves forward. You can go back retroactively and get support for missed assignments or, failed tests. I think there's quite a few questions. So I want to do move forward. This is kind of a contentious subject because every institution is different, but how updated your neuropsych has to be, right? So when I worked at BC wants to see an updated neuropsych or updated evaluation that happened in high school. And I know at Northeastern, they really push on adult measures, like testing beyond adult measures. Could you touch base on your requirements at this Jim and Ben, because you look at those, how updated the evaluation on a disability has to be in order to qualify for your support?
For my program, it doesn't matter. Just because you walked across the stage, and received your high school, diploma, doesn't mean that your dyslexia automatically and miraculously just disappeared. So I just need documentation of that learning disability. Student Disability Services, on the other hand, because they are part of the Americans with Disability Act and the enforcement arm and compliance arm of the Americans with Disability Act, they may have different requirements. Here's what I know about DU's Student Disability Services. When you apply and when you'll make your initial application for accommodations, send in what you've got. They will try to make it work. Nobody wants to make you have to take another neuropsych evaluation. They're expensive, they're hard to get, they're draining. If they can use what you've got, they'll make it work. If they need more, they'll ask you to do something else.
Yeah, and I would say from a UConn perspective, again, I'll answer this sort of the similar way to what Jim just said. So again, for Beyond Access, not a program requirement for our specific program. So again, that's not something we are looking at or we have any needs for with Beyond Access. With our, again, General Center for Students with Disabilities, which is the Disability Service Office, it's a similar, sort of process to what you just heard. They're typically asking students to submit what they have. They don't generally recommend students go out and get something new without at least checking in with them first, because oftentimes when a student reaches out initially to register with our center, they'll meet with someone one-on-one who can review the documentation they have and sort of talk about where they are. And again, it's the same process here at UConn. You know, generally the disability service professionals within our office are looking to go off of what students already have, and there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule where it needs to be within X amount of months or years. It's usually looking at it based on where the student's at, and if there is a need to get further documentation, the disability service professional will talk specifically with the student about exactly what they're looking for.
And it's a good rule to have to check with the disability services office. The websites are almost always up to date, and it's every institution, as you can see, can be a little bit different. So always check with the institution before you actually apply or even enroll. Okay, so I have one more quick question. What role does peer support or mentoring play in your services? And I think, Lisa, you could touch upon this because you do a lot of peer support and mentoring.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to share. So I co-direct the mentor program alongside the Justice, Equity, Belonging, and Identity Office at Holy Cross. And I think a peer mentor is really helpful for students in their transition into college, because I think it's sometimes easier to open up with a peer than it is to a professional staff member. Peers are also trained extensively around resource navigation, as well as referrals and best practices around referring students to resources, as well as modeling the use of resources for the students. And usually our peers are junior and senior mentors. And a lot of times the matching that we do with the program, I match students with peer mentors based on lots of different criteria. So I know that if a mentor is particularly capable of supporting students around navigating student accessibility services, that might be a connection I would make. If students have shared lived experiences, that might be a reason for pairing. It's also a year-long program, and students are they're required, but they're encouraged strongly to meet with a mentor once per week for at least a half an hour check-in. And it's really a program that we've received a lot of positive feedback from students, and a lot of times mentees of the program actually go on to become mentors, because mentors make such a tremendous difference in their experience that it makes the students want to give back in that same way.
Yeah, I have one more really good question here. So before we end, okay, I don't know if either of you want to take on this, but what's the greatest challenge you face with students and families, especially new students? Like, what are expectations? Okay, let me restart that. What's the greatest challenge you face with students and families, especially new students? What expectations might they have that aren't feasible? Have you encountered this? Ben, you sound like you're ready to go on this.
Yeah, I can start with this one. I know Jim's gone first on pretty much every question. So, yeah, I would say we've talked a lot already about some of the big challenges. You know, we mentioned earlier things like self-advocacy, time management. Those are definitely with especially new to UConn students that we're seeing, you know, just getting used to a different structure and a different system. I would say that, again, another thing that maybe I can add that also aligns with the expectations are that, you know, I don't want to generalize what happens when students are in education systems before college, but a lot of the times there's a higher level of modification that can be done in courses just based on the different, you know, applicability of whether it's IDEA or ADA or whatever it is. And when we come to UConn, again, it's always that conversation we're having within our disability office, our Center for Students with Disabilities, and working with professors and faculties on like what are reasonable modifications, what are reasonable accommodations given this class, how can we keep the learning objectives of the class intact while also providing, you know, accommodations for students. So that isn't to say it's sort of exclusionary in any way. Obviously, our goal is always to have students be able to participate and get accommodations for whatever they need. But I do think some of the expectations we see sometimes for students are maybe surprised that things, you know, maybe aren't as modified or aren't as changed, or maybe aren't aligning with some of the things that they might be used to previously in previous school experiences. And that's something that, you know, whether it's in our, like, we have prospective student info sessions that our office hosts. So we try to make that clear in those that we encourage students and families to come to ask questions. We try to make that as clear as possible. And then, you know, also we try to meet with students and families ahead of time as they're like going throughout their college sort of search and looking where they're trying to go. We try to like meet with them and broach that subject just to try to address that as early as we can to make sure that's maybe not always as big of a surprise or a difference than they see, than we see sometimes from students.
Well, thank you so much. I know there are some more questions, but I think our time is up, and I really, really appreciate you coming in and talking about your support services to give the students and families an idea of what lies beyond high school, so they have the support what they need when they get there. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a really great opportunity to share.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.